Hi guys, so today I wanted to have a little mini training slash discussion on how freedom, it's a paradox, freedom comes from commitment. Okay, it's a very interesting paradox because commitment sounds like the opposite of freedom, right? Commitment sounds like responsibilities. And freedom should keep you from responsibilities, right? However, this is something I've been contemplating a lot recently, that freedom actually comes from commitment. And we can see it in the irony of people who win the lottery. Did you know this? People who win the lottery often blow that money and go down, they go on a deep downward spiral into dark little holes, drugs, alcohol, who knows where they spend it, and they end up right back where they're at. Okay, so it's not a money thing. We also see people who retire and they've lived their whole lives working for the end goal of having the freedom of not doing anything, right? Being retired. It's like this big goal. And then they retire and they're so bored and they get depressed or they get sick, and they also just start to spiral downward because they no longer feel a purpose in their life. And I'll even reflect on my own story that, I used to think freedom meant traveling the world and being able to work online and live wherever I wanted. And I was a digital nomad. I was backpacking the world and I was bouncing around essentially with no goal in mind, just really following the feminine flow of, ooh, life is going to bring me here. No, life is going to bring me there. And don't get me wrong, this is very fun and it is very, very fulfilling to an extent. And there does come a time when, like, the sunsets, they just don't look as enjoyable anymore. You've seen so many, and there comes a time where the shallow relationships from moving around constantly, they're just not really filling your cup anymore. And, if you have been a world traveler or a digital nomad at some point in your life, you probably know that you go to these places and you will always meet people who, from the outside, they appear, like they have all of the freedoms in the world. They have the freedom to, live from the beach in Thailand and working from their laptop. It looks great. And, they will be the first people to tell you that they're really lost and that they're actually really confused about, oh, where do I go next? I don't know what to do next. Like, I was thinking of maybe from here going over to Vietnam and doing the motorcycle ride up to Hanoi, or I'm thinking of maybe going to Bali. And they just continue this rat race of traveling around, moving around the world, being in this cycle of having so many options, no commitments, no standards, no real boundaries for themselves, that it actually creates the opposite of freedom, right? So for me, freedom is a feeling. Freedom is a state of expansion. It's a state that brings bliss. It brings love. It brings joy. It brings excitement to be alive. And I have learned this. I mean, you can see right now, I have a really big commitment. And I'm not saying you need to go and have babies to have a commitment, but just start to consider, like, do you have boundaries in your life? Do you have values? I wake up every day and I sit down and I know what practice I'm going to do, because I am always doing a sadhana practice for either 40 days. Right now I'm doing a 90-day practice. It's the same thing every day. And if I didn't have this boundary, this commitment, maybe I would wake up and maybe I would hit snooze a couple of times. Maybe I would get up and I'd be like scrolling social media because I'm free. I can do whatever I want. Maybe my practice If I didn't have a commitment, suddenly I'm like scrolling through YouTube and trying to pick a video of what I should do. And the thing is that looks like freedom, right? Being able to choose, being able to do what you want. But it's actually leaking your energy. It's actually leaking your energy. If you had a commitment, you know, you wake up, you know exactly what you're doing. You sit down, you drop into your meditation, you drop into your practice. You're not thinking so much about it. It allows less thinking and more action. Having values, having commitments, having boundaries creates less thinking and more depth, more deepening into what it is you're doing. You know, we can see this in our practice. If you commit to one thing, you can go really, really deep into it. When I'm working with a practice for 40 days, 90 days, years, who I become through that process is, wow, it's absolutely incredible. It would be so different if I was just constantly switching it around day after day. And, you know, same thing in relationships. There is a difference between someone who, and the depth that you can experience, the trust that you can experience in a relationship. That's freedom. That's freedom. Being able to really deeply, deeply trust and to really deeply love someone, that only comes through the container of the commitment. That's not going to come from a fling. You could feel this excitement, you could feel the butterflies, but the really deep trust, deep love, the freedom that comes from really trusting, that is freedom. And it only comes from having that commitment, that container, having that boundary, right? So the other piece I want to, you know, speak to here is like for giving the example of your practice, right? You sit down every single day, not for future results. And yes, who you will become by the end, like let's give it like a 90-day practice. I'm doing this practice for 90 days. Who you become by the end, like yes, at the end, you are going to feel better. You're going to feel more energized. You're going to feel more clear. You're going to feel more confident. You're going to feel a lot better. But it's not something that happens at the end. It's never a result at the end. It's the actions that you take today. It's the commitment that you take today that creates that shift. It's you committing today to your practice. Then tomorrow you do the same thing. And then the next day you do the same thing. That commitment is transforming you today and then tomorrow and then the next day. It's not in 90 days you're going to transform. No, it becomes the practice is the transformation. Same thing in relationships. It's not marriage or kids or till death do us part. It's who are you today because of this commitment? Who are you today in your relationship because you've chosen this person and you're no longer lost in the confusion of, oh, well, what about this guy or what about that guy or this woman or that woman? There's a lot of confusion that happens when we get stuck in these energetic leaks of options. There's a lot of space for confusion there. You know, going back to the traveling example, I remember being like, oh my gosh, like I would have so many options that it would stress me out. You know, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I got this yoga job in, you know, Nicaragua, but I also was thinking of like moving back to Bali and doing like free diving and, you know, your values have to dictate also. You have to be strong in your values so that you can make your decisions. You can say, I'm going to double down on myself. This is what I value. And this is what I do. This is what I decide. It's also calling you deeper into your leadership, right? Having that ability to decide. How do you have that ability to decide? It starts with your values. It starts with your boundaries. It starts with your commitments. And there is so much freedom here. So much freedom. So I just launched an offering called the Liberated Woman. And a big piece of this puzzle is freedom. And I don't want to confuse anyone. I don't want to confuse anybody who's thinking, oh, wow, freedom means, you know, I'll be able to just quit my job and move to Costa Rica and have a baby. Like, yes, I am here. I am an example of that. I haven't quit any job, however. I have been committed to my work. I have been committed to my values. My values are, you know, health. That's the first thing that brought me here. I value health. When I was pregnant, I knew I needed to live somewhere that had really great access to water, really high vibrational food, really beautiful community and support. I'm living right next door to the midwife that I was working with. I'm on these lands. I have access to a river, a private river right here on these lands. So these are some of the things I value. That is what it made me choose to come here, right? So your values get to really choose. It's also, you know, when you're starting to work for yourself, if you are a business owner, if you are working for yourself, or if you want that, if you want to, you know, enter the world of this crazy world of entrepreneurism and, you know, working for yourself and whatever you want, it starts with a commitment also. Because if you're constantly changing your mind about, oh, I want to do this, but then I also want to do that, this is going to leak a lot of your energy. It's just going to create a lot of confusion. And so we've got to clean up our energy leaks. We've got to get clear on where am I leaking energy in the indecision, in that place of indecision. Even as something as small as, what do you do when you wake up in the morning? Do you sit down? Do you meditate? Do you have a practice that you're anchored into, that you're committed to every day? Or is it just free flow all the time? You know, we've got to, yes, play in the feminine flow and allow the excitement and the feminine energy to move us and to inspire us. That's a really big part of it. But we need the masculine container. We need the masculine that comes in with the container, the discipline, the boundaries, saying, this is what we are contained in. This is where you're allowed freedom within. And you can go so much deeper within that container. You know, I studied industrial design for just a year. I realized I wasn't really that great with heavy machinery, so I dropped that minor. But I remember I had this design class, and the instructor asked this question. I'll never forget it. And he asked, what do you think would allow more creativity? If I told you, paint something with any color you wanted, or if I told you, paint something just using this shade of blue. And the answer, which is, you know, unsuspecting, but the more boundaries you have, even from a creative lens, even for artists or musicians, the more boundaries that you have, the more creativity will happen. So keep this in mind in your own life. How can you tighten up your boundaries? How can you get really clear on your values? How can you, you know, really get clear as well on your commitments? What are you committed to? And, you know, women, if you're listening to this and you want this, I would say one of the best ways to do this comes from, yeah, committing to yourself, but being in containers. So putting yourself in a container and where you're committing to it. So for example, I have this upcoming program, this experience, The Liberated Woman. It's 4 months of being in a container, 4 months of having a commitment, saying yes to yourself, saying yes to showing up, to being in the boundaries and the structure of what this experience is going to unfold for you, which is deeper embodiment, deeper empowerment, liberation, freedom. But it starts with the commitment, right? There's so much freedom that is going to happen, so much expansion and joy and growth and creativity and liberation that will happen within this container. But it starts with the commitment, with saying yes to it. So this is about 15 minutes now. Thank you for this little baby. She was sleeping and then she just woke up. And, you know, I want to be a mom that can do both. I don't want to have to separate my work here and being in service to my clients and my community and being a mom. I have decided I get to do both. So here she is on this little chat with me. And I think she makes it a lot cuter anyways. So, mwah. Thank you for listening. If you listen to this, if you have any questions about the liberated woman, this is going to be, oh, okay. It's going to be an incredible journey with an intimate group of women. And also, if you want to be initiated into a sadhana, a devoted practice, I am initiating my students, my clients, and my membership in about 3 hours from now. So if you happen to listen to this before then and you want to jump in, please reach out to me. It's so powerful having these practices that keep us really anchored in that masculine energy so that the feminine energy can flow, right? Every morning, even though you're doing the same practice, you will experience it differently because who we are day to day changes. So there's freedom within that container, just like we spoke about. So if you're interested in joining for that, also reach out. Women, the liberated woman is going to be life-changing, exceptional experience. I would love to have you inside if this calls to you. If you want to learn from me, reach out. We can have a conversation. And thank you for listening to this little discussion if you heard all the way to the end. And let's go. You ready to eat? All right, lots of love. Mwah.